Hey, there's a group that I'm in on Facebook, and there's a guy in there named Jason that posted a really, really good question. Got a lot of feedback, a lot of answers. And he had said, lately, as a podcast guest myself, I've run across several podcasters who charge, which is fine. I'm not complaining about that. However, which ones that do charge do you trust? I don't want to just throw money at someone and not necessarily get a return on investment. So, what do I look for when talking to folks who charge? What are the red flags? I'm just confused about it. And I thought, man, that's a solid question. He had like 78 or 90 comments by the time I got in there to look. And I was super surprised. Across the board, a lot of people said flat out, I would never pay to appear as a guest on a show. In fact, they should be paying me to guest on their show. And it was really surprising. Like 90% of the comments had that kind of tone and timbre to it about, oh, I'd never pay to be a guest on the show. Like, how dare they ask me to pay money? And the first thing I thought of was, okay, as a podcast host myself, it takes time to edit and publish and promote the episode. And even just taking the time to spend with the other person, that takes time. Okay. Even if a podcast host doesn't do any editing, publishing, or promoting, if the only thing they do is record the episode raw and push it out to, Buzzsprout or Spotify or wherever they have it, and they don't do any extra post production on it, that still takes time. Okay. That is something that, they could have literally done anything else. They could have done something that could generate some revenue. They could have invested that time in something, anything else, but they chose to spend it with you as the podcast guest. And I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this from a position of love. When you say, I would never pay to be a guest on somebody's podcast, what you're saying is that every single podcast host that you've interacted with, you don't really value their time. And time is the one resource that none of us can ever get back. We have a set amount of it. We don't know how much of it we've got, but when we volunteer to spend some of that time with you, it's worth something. It is worth something. Okay. But what I'd like to do is share a little bit about monetization tactics, whether you are a host or you are a guest, because the fact is, there are shows out there that are really awesome and they do charge to have guests appear. And I want you to be able to feel like you could guest on those shows and realize that you can get a return on your investment. And full disclosure, this is really for people who have a business, they have some kind of a revenue stream somehow. It doesn't have to be a full-time business. It could be a part-time side gig, something like that. But it's going to be something that can generate revenue for you on the back end so that you actually get a return on your investment on the front end. So I'll start with host first. All right. So I often teach people about like how do you monetize a podcast? And it's more about, hey, you've got the relationships, you got the people coming in, you're sharing time with them, you're getting to know them, you're ascertaining like, hey, is this a person who could be a possible client? Are they somebody that could bring possible clients to me? Should we perform some kind of a strategic partnership, something like that, right? But it's more than just, hey, it's two people having a conversation, shooting the bull and learning about each other. It's like, yeah, it's learning about each other, but then there's a clear next step. Okay. So it is perfectly okay to take a shortcut and say, hey, I'm going to charge $97 to have you appear on my podcast. Now, if that sounds a little bit out there, if that sounds like, why would I pay this person $97 to appear on their show? That's a fair question. The onus is on the podcast host then to be abundantly and crystal clear about what it is that a guest will get out of appearing on their show. All right. So it's way more than just the time, it's way more than just the listenership that they might get. What else do they get? Okay. As long as you're communicating the clear value, and I'll share some examples here in just a little bit just to get the creative juices flowing. But as long as the value that you provide is at least 10 times what you're charging, make it an irresistible offer. People will pay to guest on your show if they are growth minded, if they understand, hey, if I pay this person this much money, I know I'm going to get this much value out the back end. I'll be able to sell this many services, this many ebooks, get this many enrollees in my course, my workshop, whatever it is, sell this many t-shirts, tumblers, and drawstring bags, whatever it is. They know that there's going to be a measurable and calculatable difference on the outset. And they're like, I can't not do it. I got to do it. Right. Plus you get to meet a cool person. Here's an idea. Here's a few ideas. So let's say you're a podcast host and you're thinking, okay, I want to interview business owners. I want to have them on my show and I want to charge 97 bucks. I'm just going to go with that. I know it's kind of like a nice, not really a nice round number, but in marketing and sales, it seems like any numbers that end in seven get a higher conversion rate than, just charging an even $100. $100 is three numbers. That's a big number. Well, it's only three bigger than 97. So we'll just say 97 going forward. So I'm going to charge 97 bucks to have somebody on my show. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a listing on my website. So, like for a whole month after the episode airs, they're going to have a listing on my website, which serves as like a mini lead magnet. And so on my end, I'm going to be drawing all kinds of people to come to my website, come check this out, come see the lineup of people that I've interviewed recently, check out what we've got going on. If somebody comes across that listing and they say, I need to find out more about what that person does, then that button that clicks should go right through to that guest's webpage, right through to their lead magnet that they set up specifically for the podcast, which I'll talk about here in just a little bit when I talk and switch over to the guests, right? And that should result in more traffic for them and more conversions for them and a higher likelihood that a person that visits is like, yeah, I want to get started, even if that's a free thing. Now the guest has the opportunity to upsell that person, and they know that that person came by way of that podcast that they paid 97 bucks to appear on. So if the guest on the other end has a service that's $97, and if they have a 10% chance of conversion, we'll say if they're a terrible salesperson and that's their conversion rate, then every 10 people that come on their website by way of hearing the podcast, there's a 100% chance that you're going to get a sale. So every time 10 people come, you get 97 bucks. All right. So there is a return there. That's just one example. That's just one example. Another example would be if you actively promote them on the show so that within the first few minutes, you drop something about, hey, we're going to talk more about this at the end, but just to catch people up front before they tune out at the halfway point, what's a good way for people to get a hold of you and just briefly give us an example of what you do. And then they get to do a little mini pitch. So if people listening are like, I'm going to check that out while I'm listening to this episode, they can. They don't have to wait until the end. Okay, they're still listening. They're still boosting up the listenership numbers, but they're able to take action right then and go find out more. Okay, so those are two examples of ways that you can kind of boost the return on investment, the proposed ROI of your show if you're going to charge 97 bucks for somebody to appear. Okay, but get creative, all right? At the end of the day, if what you're doing isn't providing, like I said, more than 10 times the value of what you're charging. So if what you're doing is almost $100, we'll say, if it's not providing at least $1,000 worth of value on the back end, then either increase the value that you're adding or have the people on your show that actually would get that value. Okay. If you have somebody that's only selling $7 ebooks and it would take a lot of people to recoup that investment, maybe that's not the kind of person you want to have on. Maybe you want to have somebody that their lowest ticket thing is a $497 workshop, something like that. All right. Keep that in mind. And that's also a way that you can identify the kind of people that you really want to have be on your show. Okay. So I'm going to switch over to the guests and just to wrap up the host part, I want you to come away feeling encouraged that, yeah, you could charge to have people appear on your show because it does take time. And if you're going to do a really good job of editing, publishing, and promoting, that takes time. If that takes 3 hours, if it takes 1 hour for you to be on a show with somebody, and then it takes an additional 3 hours after that, that's 4 hours of your time. If you were a consultant, you'd probably be charging $500 an hour or $250 an hour or whatever it is. So it's anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000 that you're just giving them for free. And if they're going to balk at having to pay 97 bucks for that, then maybe they're not the right fit for the show, or you're not super clear on what it is that you're doing in exchange for that 97 bucks. So I'm going to put I'm going to put the host aside for a moment, and then we're going to talk about the guest. All right. So yeah, guest. I am a host, but I'm also a guest. I love guesting on shows, and it's always a matter of getting a return on your investment. Like I would never say, yeah, you should just pay, you should just fling out 25 bucks, 97, 112, whatever they're asking for. Just get it because you're going to get people that are going to hear you maybe, and you're just going to have money rolling in, right? It's always got to be clear what the return on investment is going to be. Now, I'm going to share a tactic with you that I've only ever heard of one other person in my entire life doing this. And I can't imagine that this is the only guy that does this. There's got to be dozens or hundreds even of other guests that do this. But there's a guy I met last year in DC, and his name's Justin. And he showed me that one of the stages he does with his podcast guesting, because it really works well for him, is he actually puts together a marketing agreement. And I'm like, marketing agreement? I'm like, can you show me that? Can you send me a copy of that? He goes, yeah, absolutely. So he emailed it to me. And I was looking through this and I thought, man, this is genius. Like, he makes sure that every single host that he agrees to guest on, whether it's a paid spot or not, they have to sign this marketing agreement. Okay. And there are things in the marketing agreement like, okay, the episode has to air within 30 days of the recording date. The episode has to have at least 5 pieces of unique micro content and 5 unique pieces of verbiage to accompany the micro content. And it has to be posted 5 days, like maybe like, 2 days apart from each other, but you got to post it like not all the same day, but spread it out so that the algorithm is more friendly to it. It has to have a link to a particular place, like on my side, not in the post itself. Don't put the link in the post itself, but put it in as the first comment. So whatever it is that they listen to, they need to know in advance, like, okay, check the first comment for details on how to find out more. And then that link is in there. Because, if you put a link in a post, that, platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn are like, oh, they're taking attention away from the platform, nerf their reach. And then you don't reach as much, right? And then that affects the podcast guest. But all of these different conditions have to be met in order for the host to be able to keep the money. And if they actually fall short of any of that, they get to get a refund. So if you do guest on a show and you say, okay, I'm going to pay you $97 to be on your show, but you got to hold up your end of the bargain, bud, and you got to do all this stuff, it's actually gonna, there's a risk-free thing for it, like you can figure out, okay, if you hold up your end of the bargain, I'll give you a 5-star review on, Apple, Spotify, whatever. And you can help the host out, but you want to make sure that you get a good return. And just like I was saying with the host before, if you've got some kind of offer that is very, very clear and you have a high likelihood of people that listen to this kind of show coming into your ecosystem and buying your thing, or even if it's a free offer that you have and you have a high chance of, if they indicate interest and they download this PDF, that shows they need this kind of help. And then in a few days, I'm going to contact them and see if they want to have another call about this other thing that's a low ticket offer. If you have a pretty good chance of doing that, that's another great way to get an ROI on your investment. Okay. Again, make sure that you're doing your due diligence and saying, okay, if I'm going to pay $97, then I know I can get at least $1,000 worth of value. I know I can sell this many courses, this many books, this many whatevers, and make that difference up and then some. And then it becomes a lot more valuable. Okay. So at the end of the day, what it's, for both hosts and guests, to host, it's okay to put a price tag on having guests appear on your show, but you've got to be abundantly clear on what it is that they're going to get out of it. Okay. Guests, it's also okay to put some money towards some of the shows that are charging, but you're actually, and I forgot to mention this, you're actually doing them a huge service by having a marketing agreement ahead of time. If you already know what they're doing with the show episode, the notes, the everything, and it's like, that's great, but I want you to also do this as part of the agreement. That's actually helping them, because if a host follows those instructions in order to retain the investment that you gave them, and it makes that particular episode take off, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to be helping that podcast host. You're going to be helping the podcasting world, actually, because so many podcast hosts struggle with listenership. And if they follow your instructions step by step, and there's like a 10x improvement or a 100x improvement in the number of downloads they get just because of your episode, then it's like, dang, what if I did that every single time? Holy moly, my show would take off. Like, that is huge. Okay. And then they're probably going to charge more. So make sure to get in before they charge, before they up their charge, right? But podcasting is just an amazing world, and when I got started back in 2019, I didn't realize how cool it was. I don't think a lot of people realize how cool it was because I know a lot of us as podcasters really got in around COVID times because everybody and their mother was catching up on their podcasts. And it's like, everybody should start a podcast. Everybody and their mother should have a podcast. And it's like, well, now they do. But we're at a point where we can use it as an amazing relationship building tool. So I love podcasting, and I know you do too. If you're watching this, you made it this far, you must love podcasting in some capacity. So I'd love to get your feedback on this. I know that the group that I'm referring to, that post actually had a lot of, I'll say, vitriol. Like there were a lot of people that were like, I would never in my life pay to be a guest on a podcast. Like that's a scam. Like what the heck? And it's like, okay, yeah, there are probably some people out there that would put a price tag on it just to try to make a quick buck. But if you hold them to a standard that they have to perform this, or they give you a refund and they sign the thing and they say, okay, I agree to that, then that decreases quite a bit of the risk. Plus, we also live in an age where reputation is key. So, I mean, if they're going to do something that's going to end up, messing up your financials, if you pay to be a guest on a show and you don't get what you thought you were going to get, or you don't get what they said you were going to get, you can always get a refund. If they don't give you a refund, you can yell about it. But I do hope this is helpful. I do hope this is helpful. This is something that I'm going to be talking about in depth in the future. I'm actually going to be putting together kind of a light, like a one-shot workshop about this, just talking about whether you're a host or a guest, how to put a price tag on guesting, how to put a price tag on hosting so that that is your entry level service, but also on the back end as a guest, how do you get a return off of that? So again, if you're a business owner, if you have a low ticket service, if you've even got some free ticket stuff, this is a good way for you to get a lot more clients because people that sell and buy podcast guest spots, they're more serious, I think. So you can get into that arena. So I'll wrap up, and I hope things are going well. And yeah, definitely drop some feedback in the comments if you'd like to hear more. And would love to keep in touch with you. If this is a topic that resonates, I want to hear from you. So talk soon. Happy podcasting. Take care. Bye.